Well, hello everybody, and welcome to No CD's Ask an Expert live Q&A. I'm your host for tonight, Tracie Ibrahim. Usually we have our lovely Dr. Patrick McGrath here, but he is off giving a talk tonight. So I am happy to be here with you all and excited to answer some questions and see what we can get going on as far as getting some answers to some of the questions. So, thank you for being here. Just to introduce myself, so I told you who I am, but I am a almost 20 years therapist specializing in the treatment of OCD and related disorders. And I'm one of the therapists at NoCD as well as their chief compliance officer. So, yeah. And if you want any information on our care or our services or any of the many, many, many insurance companies that cover our services, you can reach us by email care@nocdhelp.com, or you can go to our website treatmyocd.com. You can also find us on all the socials. So, welcome, and I'm excited to get started. Just to share for a second, I am also a person with lived experience with OCD. I've had OCD since I was 4 or 5. I am now 49. You can do the math on that one. It's been a while. I luckily, after finding lots of treatments that were not helpful, found ERP, which helped me move into a recovery and maintenance lifestyle for the last 17 years. So I'm really excited, and we're going to get started. All right. Why does the urge to do all of the physical compulsions that I do increase so much when I try not to do them? And what can I do about it? It makes me feel like I'm a lot better off just continuing to do my, hold on, part 2, compulsions. But of course, I'm not, because that is awful too. I also find ERP really difficult. And that is a really great question. So, why do physical compulsions, the urge to do them, increase when you're trying not to do them? Let's just talk about what OCD really is for a minute to even understand why we get the urge at all, okay? So OCD is both a chemical, a neurological disorder so it's happening in certain parts of your brain. And the simplified version is it's like an alarm that is broken. And so it's like somebody's setting off the fire alarm when there's no fire. And so that when we normally hear a fire alarm or hear something, you hear screaming in another room, maybe you hear a glass breaking, your natural response to that as a person with or without OCD is that we get certain chemical reactions and reactions happening in our brain to help us react fast, react urgently to solve this emergency or urgent situation, right? Solve it, find out what's wrong. So with OCD, what's happening is we have an alarm system that doesn't work the way it's supposed to. So sure, it'll go off when we hear somebody scream or glasses breaking or something, but it also goes off for no reason at all. It goes off inappropriately, if you will. And when it does that, our brain sends the messages to our body and to other parts of our brain, and it sends us the exact same chemicals, like, this is emergency, you have to solve it. And so one of the hardest parts of OCD recovery is accepting that even though we feel the urge and the compulsions so strongly, like we want to do it and we have to do it and we have to, part of what we do in exposure response prevention therapy is learn that we behave our way out of OCD. So when this emergency alarm goes off and it sends us this, oh, I've got to go do it, I've got to solve it, whatever it is, I have to react to it, I have to clean it, I have to, whatever it is, however you're compulsing, mentally compulsing, you have to go and do this thing, right? And with ERP, we realize, oh, wait a minute, this is a trigger. This is probably OCD. I'm not going to compulse. I'm not going to act like this is an emergency. I'm going to feel like it's an emergency, but recognize that I have OCD and I shouldn't react to this. I shouldn't compulse because, like what you were saying, you know, your urges to compulse actually increase the more you compulse. And the reason is you're feeding OCD and you're training your brain that this is how you deal with these uncomfortable feelings when your alarm goes off. What ERP does for you, and the type of treatment that, which is what we offer at OCD, is we teach you that when these things happen, when your alarm goes off and you get the chemical reaction and you're like, oh my gosh, we teach you to not engage in that compulsion. And we give you other types of coping strategies for sitting through that discomfort. And when you are able to do that and make that your new reaction instead of compulsing, over time, your brain learns a new reaction. And the majority of the time, your brain will react with less intensity. And the distress and anxiety lasts for less and less time the more you practice ERP and the response prevention. So I hope that that explains that. When you say you feel like you'd be better off just doing your compulsions, I promise you, anyone who has ever tried to just compulse their way to an answer or to feeling better always knows you always end up feeling worse and exhausted and more confused. So I would say just give it as much of a go as you can. I know it's hard. ERP therapy, just like any therapy, isn't easy and comfortable, but boy, does it have results, and it has fast results. It is the gold standard care for OCD. So good luck with that, and just stick with it. Stick with it. All right. Let's see what else we have. Because I have OCD, I feel inferior to everyone else, and that lowers my confidence a lot. I tend to be paranoid and afraid of social situations, and it's making my life miserable. What can I do? You know, that makes me sad because I feel sad that any mental illness is stigmatized, and you know, it's not portrayed in media or in general in society what OCD really is, what kind of suffering it really is, right? People think it's some kind of fun, quirky way to be clean and neat and tidy, or you're quirky and fun in some way because you have OCD. And it's not true. It's a lot of suffering. And I think when you suffer from any type of mental illness, whether it's OCD, depression, anxiety, you know, that can lower your confidence a lot because you sometimes, you know that there's this stigma out there. But I would encourage you to find community support. At NoCD, for all of our members, we have community support groups where you can find other people dealing with the things you're dealing with. There are some viable, trustworthy social media sites. NoCD has some. The International OCD Foundation has some. Some of us have advocacy on Instagram and different places where you can go to feel a sense of community and feel less alone. As far as being kind of paranoid or afraid of social situations and kind of what to do about that, I would say, maybe if you haven't already been assessed, maybe get assessed to see if maybe you're having some type of social anxiety. The good news is social anxiety or social anxiety disorder is actually also treated with ERP. So that's kind of the cool thing. So some people have social anxiety disorder and they have OCD, and they can actually treat it all one way. So so that's what I would recommend. And just know that you're not alone and you're not less than anybody else. I think that having mental illnesses myself has made me better at what I do, has made me more passionate about what I do, and have more compassion for other people who are suffering. I don't think that we should walk around feeling bad about ourselves. everybody has something they're dealing with, and one thing isn't better or worse than the other. So, I hope that you get some support with that. Oh, yes, I would love to talk about this. I want to believe that I'm straight and that I'm just suffering from HOCD, or sexual orientation OCD. But whenever I see a man, I feel urges in my mouth that make me think I want to kiss, and I also feel urges to touch him. Thank you for bringing that up. When we talk about OCD, we always talk about intrusive thoughts. We also talk about intrusive images sometimes, but we don't always talk about other types of intrusions that are normal and common with OCD. And intrusive urges is one of those things that do exist, and it is real, and it is confusing, and it makes us wonder why we are feeling this way. I can give you a very good personal example. I get two different types of intrusive urges sometimes. One of them is when I'm at the grocery store. Every once in a while, I suddenly have a feeling come over my body, and I start getting thoughts, and I think, you're going to hurt people. You're going to get the big, heavy cans from the grocery store shelf, and you're just going to start throwing them at people's heads. And I don't know why. I'm not a violent person. I couldn't tell you why this is what OCD decided, but I feel it in my body. Like, you might not be able to stop yourself. And you feel it, and it feels real. These urges feel real. And what gets confusing is when you have OCD and you don't know you have OCD, or you haven't accepted that you have OCD. You think, what does this mean? Does this mean that I'm attracted to people that I don't think that I'm attracted to? Does it mean, there are intrusive bodily functions? People have groanal responses, or things that happen with their genitals, tingles, erections, different types of things that can happen. And, there's something called arousal non-concordance, which is sometimes we can get arousal feelings, but they don't match what we're actually attracted to. So this is one of those situations where you're saying, hey, I'm not normally attracted to these people, but when they walk by me, I get urges. I think I might want to kiss them. I think that I might touch them. And that is very, very normal. And that is something that you can work on in ERP with a therapist. And definitely, just know that it's normal. It's just not something a lot of people talk about. So I'm glad that you asked about it. And what can you do about it? Personally, I like to lean into my OCD with humor. I like to work with members and help them use humor. It feels really heavy to have OCD. It feels really uncomfortable to have OCD. And let's just be honest, it sucks, right? It sucks. Nobody wants it. Nobody would be like, yeah, I hope I get OCD. It's not a superpower. It sucks to have OCD. But the good news is, although it's not curable, it is treatable, and it is manageable, and you can have a good life. So one of the things I do is in my recovery, and what I encourage people to do, is when you have these heavy things, right? Like this is an example of where you're questioning your sexuality or attraction, what you're going to do with your body, right? This is really heavy. Because I know it's coming from this broken alarm and it doesn't actually mean anything, I will make a joke out of it. So I might say something like, oh, yeah, I cannot wait. I will just, kiss every man that walks by me. Why not? That sounds amazing. Thank you, OCD, for coming up with all these great ideas. You can do that. You can make like a little song to kind of break it up a little bit. These are strategies called cognitive diffusion techniques, and they take this yucky discomfort that we have, and it kind of helps us manage it and get rid of a little bit of it. We can never get rid of intrusive thoughts or images or urges. We can't just learn how to make them never happen. What we can learn is when they happen, how do we react? So when your body's doing something and you feel an urge, it feels so real. Part of your recovery and your discovery process through healing and getting treatment for OCD is understanding that it's going to feel real, but it's not. and it's not important. It doesn't matter what OCD is alerting you about. It's not real and it's not important. So, yeah, I hope that that was helpful. Let's see what else we have here. All right. Hi, I'm trying to give myself motivation to do treatment, but of course I have just right OCD. So that seems to get in the way when I want to make sure I'm doing it right. And it says I get consumed with questions that make me doubt whether or not I'm following treatment correctly. And then I give in to one more compulsion. Why can't I just make myself more motivated to change? I get stuck on so many levels. Great question. And also bringing up, this just right kind of OCD. We have names for probably most things that OCD does, but not all of them. But sometimes you might have heard of meta OCD. It's like OCD about OCD. And it's like, am I doing this right? Am I doing it wrong? Am I doing too much? Did I not do enough? I would say that happens to most people. It happens to me on and off. I'll be like, I think you're doing too much. Maybe you should give yourself a break. Do you think it's too much? But here's the answer. There's no manual that says this is the exact way, and this is how many times, and this is for how long, and then stop, right? And then have a sip of water, and then, right? There is no instruction manual of exact perfection on how to do ERP. It's very individual. I think doing more than less is good, but I think if you start questioning, is it too much? Is it too little? That's one of those OCD questions that's asking for a certain answer that doesn't exist. So my answer to that would be, am I doing this too much? I don't know. Am I doing enough of it? I don't know, but I'm going to do a decent amount. What's a decent amount? I don't know. Do you have a therapist? Did your therapist give you some ideas? If not, it might be a good idea. If you've already been in therapy and you're in recovery and maintenance, I would say just make sure you're doing some ERP to make sure that you don't kind of fall off the wagon. And, why is it hard to motivate to change? A couple reasons. One is it's uncomfortable to change. And two is we get comfortable with how we are, and new things can seem scary. So even though we're uncomfortable in our compulsions life, we still are familiar with it. And leaning into and facing your fears, which we do with ERP, can just feel like, gosh, do I want to go through that? And the answer is yes. I promise you do want to go through it. You do want to do it. I find for most people, when you do enough ERP in the beginning to find that little sense of a relief or a reduction in your symptoms and symptoms intensity, that's what usually motivates people to keep going and to do more, because they want more of that relief and they want more of that recovery. So I would say kind of jumping on board with that. And when you say you kind of give into more compulsions, we all give into compulsions. There is nobody that never compulses. It doesn't make sense. That would be a perfect condition. Like I said, I've been treating OCD for about 20 years. I've been doing ERP for myself for about 17 years. I compulse sometimes. It is really important to have self-compassion and be really nice to yourself. It's not easy having OCD. I have a few themes. Sometimes they rotate. I get different ones. And I'm just always nice to myself. And so sometimes I will be like, you know what? I think you just caught yourself compulsing. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, not perfect. Great. I also am aware that my OCD is going to become a little more intense because I was compulsing. So I prepare myself for the backlash. But then I also remind myself when OCD intensifies, like, oh, yeah, this is why I try not to compulse. So that's it. Give yourself a break. There's not a perfect thing. There's no perfect way to do it. And yeah, that's what I'd say about that. So, next question. Can medication lessen the OCD thoughts, or is ERP really the best way? Great question. Medication in general, that's out of my scope of practice as a therapist, but I can tell you as far as research studies, things of that nature, and medication in general, yeah, there's not one answer that fits everybody. We all have different brain chemistry. We all have different genetics from our family. And so everybody needs something different. Some people require medication or prefer medication because their symptoms are so intense that they feel like they would like a doctor to work with them on trying to find a little bit of symptom relief. And sometimes people can get some symptom relief from OCD, and sometimes you can't. So it's something you have to work with a psychiatrist or somebody who specializes in that. As far as ERP, yes, ERP is the gold standard treatment for OCD. As far as therapeutic interventions, it's been the gold standard, and it's been around since the 1960s. And nothing has come that has said, "Hey, this is better than ERP." So it is the gold standard. The last research article that I read coming out of UCLA, and I'm not saying it was like just released, I'm saying the last time I read something about it, it showed that if you do medication just by itself, it had the least results. If you did therapy by itself, it was the second best. And for most people who needed medication, then doing both together, that was the best. So again, how does that work? It depends on you and your chemicals. I personally, I was on medication for years. I have a very high intensity of OCD, fortunately or unfortunately. I haven't taken medications in the last probably 10 years. I only use ERP to stay on top of my symptoms, but yeah, I walk around with some discomfort a lot of time, but I just don't let it get to me. I've learned how to just coexist with my OCD feelings, and that's what ERP does for you. So if you haven't already, you can go to treatmyocd.com, head over to NoCD. We take tons of insurance plans, and you can get a free call and consult with our care team if you have questions about coverage. And we have a lot of informational articles and blogs on our website and on our socials. All right, let's see. Oh, this is a short but to the point one, right? Is it OCD if you feel like you have to prove you have OCD? Yes, it sounds very much like OCD. I was just recently talking to people in a support group at NoCD that I run on Tuesday nights about this, about how you can question anything, because OCD is the doubting disorder. So anything that you try to grasp for certainty, it just comes and it just puts doubt. So you're like, you know what? This might not be OCD. I might really be like this. I might really be a pedophile. I might really be a murderer. I might really harm my dog. I might really die of a disease. I might really harm other people, right? Whatever it is that's going on for you. All of those kinds of things. So saying, I have to prove that you have OCD. There's only one way to prove you have OCD. You get a proper assessment, and then you get a proper diagnosis. And so for me, once you've been diagnosed by a professional who knows how to do a proper OCD assessment, then you can pretty much rest that you probably have got it. Also, if you obsess and compulse, which of course most of us do that have OCD, or we wouldn't have OCD. Yep, one of those things. It will make us question absolutely everything. All right, here's a good one. How do you deal with health and somatic OCD when you have actual health issues to manage? How do you draw the line between caution and treatment and giving into obsessive tendencies? That is a great question. And I know a lot of people can relate to that. So somatic, OCD is where you have different types of feelings and symptoms going on in your body that can come out. Maybe it's, a feeling of, an upset stomach. It could be that you're noticing something somewhere in your body. But anyway, so, you're paying too much attention to your heartbeat. There's so many different ways that this can come up. So, how do you draw the line between caution and treatment? This is what I always say. If you have real health issues, then you should be going to a real care person for this, whatever it is that you have, right? A cardiologist, a PCP, whatever type of doctor you have to manage your issues. And whatever they advise you to do, that's what you should stick to. And if you have questions, you should write them down. You should ask them once. You should get clear answers. You should write that down. And when you get home and you start, oh, wait a minute, you can always look and see what was written and kind of stick by that. Obviously, we don't want to sit with symptoms and make ourselves get into a crazy health crisis. Nobody's saying that. But I do think that as you're doing ERP treatment, you will learn how the difference between what is compulsive and giving in and what is not. But I always say follow medical advice and don't Dr. Google anything, because when we start looking online, we find all the bad things. But what we have to remember about online and Googling symptoms, there is a reason why we don't do that. One is it's compulsive. Two, you will find a bunch of scary, terrible things, and then you will freak out more. And these things aren't even about you. Like I said earlier, we're all different. We have different chemistry. We are different people. We have different genetics. And so we can't compare ourselves to other people on the internet. Okay. So that just doesn't work. So if you've ever fallen down a Reddit pit or you're on TikTok following these crazy situations and people are just saying wild things, you will definitely worry yourself unnecessarily. Okay. Why do clinicians say they can treat OCD and not know ERP or treat it with ERP therapy? Well, that is an interesting question. This is what I will say, and I can't say a lot about it because I don't know. I can't speak for every clinician. I can say this: most clinicians in our graduate schools are not teaching ERP therapy like they should. And so they are being taught that things like CBT, just straight CBT therapy works, or different types of talk therapy, and it's not true, and it makes OCD worse. So I think sometimes therapists don't know that they don't know the right treatments. I can tell you when I graduated, I was taught very little about OCD and I was not taught ERP. I had to go find it myself, learn it, go to workshops. And so, I don't think people are trying to be like bad people and be like, I treat this. I think sometimes people think they do, and then they don't realize they're doing harm. So the last research that I read, somewhere in the ballpark of 80% of therapists actually misdiagnose and mistreat OCD. And it's not, I think, because they're evil. I think it's because they are misinformed. And that's why OCD has a mission to bring ERP treatment to everywhere and everybody, because we actually train people how to do it right, and we have quality control, and we have results that show that what we do works. So, all right, let's see what else we got going on. But I would say to that last one, just ask when you're calling to find out things about people, no matter who your care providers are. Ask questions. I always do. I screen people. All right. Hi, Tracie. Got any tips for morning anxiety? I tend to wake up with stronger urges that wane throughout the day. Thanks. Yes, you are looking at morning anxiety right here. This girl, I know what you're talking about. I wake up some of the time and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Am I having a heart attack, or is this like an anxiety situation? I don't know what's happening. But then I always remember, like, yeah, you know what? It's probably just weird residual anxiety that I can't figure out. So the first thing I do is don't figure it out. Don't try to figure it out. I'm like, what is this about? Did I have anxiety dreams? Oh my gosh, something going to happen. What does this mean? Oh, my whole day is ruined. There's lots of ways that we can kind of ruin our day first thing in the morning, kind of like anxiety is there. What I do, it kind of depends on what is the anxiety. If the anxiety is about something, let's say it's about a theme. I don't know what that theme might be, but let's just say you have relationship OCD and you worry that this is not the right partner for you and all of the other things that happen in relationship OCD. And let's say when you wake up in the morning, your first thought is, oh my gosh, do I love my partner enough? Is it, let's say it starts on a particular theme. I often prescribe to my members to wake up and own their OCD before OCD owns you. So if it's about a particular theme, like I was just saying, you can wake up in the morning and kind of add some humor. And the first thing you do, you can say it in your head or out loud if the people around you don't think it's weird, or who cares. You can kind of wake up, notice you're anxious, and be like, what a great day for relationship OCD. I can't believe I was lucky enough to wake up feeling this anxious. Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you so much. I cannot wait to use this to fuel me through the rest of my day. So you can kind of lean into it and be like, wow, this is anxiety. And you can lean into whatever it is that it's about, or you can just be like, I have no idea why I'm anxious. I'm not going to solve it. I'm just going to get out of bed and I'm just going to let it be there. Just going to coexist with my anxiety. I do that in the morning, but I also do that in the afternoon and sometimes in the evening. So, and anxiety is part of OCD. Sometimes people with OCD also have an anxiety disorder. There's so many different things. Let's see. I like this. This is not really a question, but it is a question, but it's like a different kind of question. Does anyone else here have harm OCD? Let's talk about harm OCD for a second. Lots of people have harm OCD. What is harm OCD? Just want to talk about it for a second to make sure that we know that different types of OCD exist. It's all OCD. We treat it all the same. Some are not worse than others. They're all the same. Just to be very, very clear. The only reason we even talk about subtypes like harm or sexual orientation or contamination, all the different, the only reason we even say those things is to describe the content of the intrusive thoughts or urges or images or feelings or whatever it is that's going on. Okay. So I do want to say that right now. Some people will be like, I have the worst kind of OCD. Don't you understand? I have whatever. So I'm going to say a bunch of different types of OCD, and they're all the same, but the content is different. Harm OCD can be things like fearing you're going to harm yourself, like suicidal OCD. And it can be homicidal OCD, fear that you're going to harm somebody else, even kill them, harm animals, bring harm to children. It could be pedophilic thoughts. It can be thoughts about your family. It can be thoughts about loved ones, loved pets, co-workers, you name it. If you care about it, it's probably about that, because OCD is a jerk. So a lot of people have OCD, and I personally love to talk about the taboo topics. My nickname's Taboo Tracie, actually. And the reason for that is I want people to feel comfortable talking about it, just like we're comfortable talking about contamination OCD or just right order and symmetry, things like that. There's hit and run OCD. There's all these different kinds of things that exist. And it's not like, oh, those people have worse OCD and I have better OCD. If you're uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable. If you're distressed, you're distressed. It doesn't matter what the content is. I can tell you sometimes we have a particular theme that sort of haunts through our lifetime, which sucks. And we have other ones that can kind of come and go. We can get a new one all of a sudden and catches us by surprise. I, in the last few months, started getting checking OCD. I've never had checking OCD. I suddenly just started getting weird about it and noticed how much I was bothered. I was like, why? I don't want a new kind of OCD. So I just started hitting it with exposures. Luckily, now it's quieting down and slowly. My usual themes are, they're always there. And I can tell you, as somebody with contamination OCD is my oldest, longest theme that never goes away. It doesn't feel any better on the worst day than something that has sexual content as part of the OCD or harm. When you feel super distressed, the content doesn't matter. Okay. It just feels like, gosh, well, this thing is illegal, or this thing, people don't want to talk about this thing. So yeah, so I totally get that. Let's talk about that. Hi, I get blasphemous thoughts, and everything that I am about to do gets contaminated with blasphemy, and I have to avoid it. Objects, people, days. I've never heard anyone with this. Well, hold on. With this specific, I think you're trying to say with this specific kind of subtype. And you're not religious either. So yes, that's a really, really, really good question. I'm going to put the first part back up here. So blasphemous thoughts, or thoughts that are religious in nature or kind of feel scrupulous, we call that scrupulosity OCD. See that? We have a name for almost all of it. And it is very, very common. What you're talking about is contamination. When we think of contamination OCD, a lot of people just think about dirt, germs, illnesses, but that's not the only types of contamination that OCD has. There are also things like emotional contamination. I don't want to be around that place, those things, those objects, those people. I don't want to be around on Tuesdays, or I have to do these things on these days. Or I might become contaminated with that stuff, or they might get contaminated from me being blasphemous, and all of those kinds of things. You don't have to be religious for it to happen. It can be like, am I a bad person? It can be religious in nature, but it doesn't have to. It can be like, am I a bad person? Am I going, to have something terrible happen to me in this life because I'm a bad person, or I think blasphemous or terrible thoughts about other people. That is something that exists. And I'm glad you brought it up, because it's another thing that people don't always talk about. We definitely talk about it, but we don't talk about it as much. So emotional contamination is a thing. Like, I don't want to be around that person because they maybe have values that are different than mine, or they do things that I don't agree with, or it's not with my morals, or, and it's somehow going to get stuck to me, right? Like, I'm going to get it, or I'm going to pass it to somebody else. So yep, that is actually a thing. And I'm glad that you brought it up. Let's see what else. Whoa. All right. Well, and somebody had shared, which, thank you for sharing that. I've been having unwanted thoughts about harming my family. That is part of harm OCD. OCD is a jerk. I don't have to tell anybody that. You all know that OCD is a jerk. Because you probably have it, or know somebody who does if you are here. And it always wants to do stuff to people you care about. Why? I don't know. Probably because it's a mental illness. And if it were pleasant, then I guess it wouldn't be a mental illness. It would be, I don't know, what would it be? It'd be like Lucky Charms or something. I don't know, like, oh, you're so lucky. You get all these positive thoughts all the time about loving everyone, or I don't know, some weird, I don't know what would be the opposite of OCD. But we talk about thoughts and things being ego dystonic versus ego systonic. Ego dystonic, meaning it doesn't agree with our values and our morals and things that we have. And then ego systonic is that it does. This is aligned with my values. So so having things OCD attack people you love is the most kind of common thing, which, you know, it just makes it that much more distressing, right? Which is again why I highly recommend humor. I know it's not funny. I know it's not like delightful, but I would always rather try to laugh and just make light of it because it feels so heavy and it never goes away. Like your whole life, you're going to have OCD. Do you want it to feel heavy forever? Do you always have to laugh? No, you don't always have to laugh. There are other things that you can do. But I don't know. That's just one of my super favorites. Now I can't see where it is, but I saw that somebody asked. All right, I can't find it, but I remember what the question was. The question was, is there something other than maybe, maybe not that I can do to lean into uncertainty when I'm doing ERP? And the answer is yes. Really, what are we saying when we say that you should respond maybe, maybe not? We're saying kind of sit with the uncertainty and the possibility and just sort of kind of let it sit there. Don't judge it. Don't interact with it. And so do you have to have a response? It's like almost like saying like, if OCD is talking to me, do I have to talk back to it? You don't have to, actually. You can say nothing. There are many different ways to do ritual prevention or response prevention. It can look like bullying your OCD, because I mean, OCD feels like a bully to us, so we can bully it back. It's like appropriate bullying. So sometimes when my OCD is getting loud and obnoxious and I'm just trying to do something either in my head or out loud, I will be like, shut up. I might even curse at it. I will not give you an example of that right now, but you can imagine. Sometimes I just let it be there and I just keep going on with whatever I was trying to do before it started bothering me. And it's just sort of existing and you can it's blurry, but you kind of see it and you kind of hear it, but you're not paying attention to it. You're just letting it be there. You can make a song about it, make a joke about it. You can be like, thank you, OCD. I really appreciate that so much. Really. When I lean in, and my members will know that, if any of you are out there listening right now, I like to have people lean into it because the biggest issue is that we're afraid of what OCD is saying or doing or what the content is. And one good way to take it back is to make it worse than OCD is. So I look at it kind of like a challenge. I'm a little bit competitive when it comes to games like this. So I'm like, let's see who gets the point, me or OCD. So let's say OCD's like, hey, here's a harm thought about your dad. I'll be like, wow, why only my dad? Don't you think that I should also harm my mom? I mean, it feels so unfair, right? Or saying something about one of my children. And I'm like, I have 3 kids. Why only attacking one? Right? So you can make it worse. And sometimes I find that it just sort of flips OCD over on its back. This goes for all themes and all things. Sometimes I can shut it down for a little bit because it's like, whoa, you went far. One of the ways I was leaning into my new checking OCD, I I was driving away and I was like, oh, I don't think that you shut the garage. And I was like, great, because the garage has a door that goes into my house and I don't lock it. And my kid was home and I was leaving. And, I was like, you should go check it and blah. And it was all distressing with the chemicals. So I was like, ha ha ha. You know what, OCD? I'm not going to go back and check. I hope somebody does walk into my garage. I hope they take all my stuff. And while they're there, I hope they go up and take my kid too. You know why? She is pricey. She's a teenager. She costs a lot of money. If you take her now, I should be all set. I won't even have to pay for college. Amazing. Thank you, OCD. I'm so glad. Hopefully I didn't shut the garage, right? After like a couple minutes of this banter with myself, I'm not feeling as anxious anymore because I'm turning it back. So that's one example of leaning in. All right. Okay. Any thoughts on real event OCD when you have really done some things that you're not proud of, been forgiven, but cannot forgive myself for the ways I've hurt others, not physically? Thanks. Yes, real event OCD. First, we should say, what is real event OCD in the first place? Real event OCD can be a number of things. It can be a real event that happened where something actually happened that you're not very happy about or proud of yourself or whatever, something didn't go right. And now you are having lots of different obsessions and compulsions around that. It can also be maybe that an event happened, but you're not actually 100% sure that anything bad happened, but you start ruminating about it. Did I? It's possible I could have done that. Did I have consent? All these different questions you might ask yourself. And we find that the more that you ruminate on things like real event OCD, you tend to start plugging in unreal facts or things, and it gets more and more tangled and confusing, just so everybody knows, which is why we try and just sit with, hey, whatever has happened has happened. It is now over, and today is today, and I have to just be in this moment. I can't go back, and I can't change anything that I've done. We have all done things that we're not proud of. I will never forget, and this was just such a good thing. We should probably do this for everyone. But one of my coworkers once said, for kind of an example of that nobody's perfect and we all do things we're not proud of, one of my coworkers passed around this anonymous survey to a bunch of therapists, all these random therapists, and said, anonymously write one thing that you've done that you're not proud of. Maybe it was illegal, maybe whatever it was, right? So people wrote all these things, and it was so interesting to read the list, because I'm like, oh my gosh, which wrong thing should I add on here? I haven't done just one wrong thing. I've done a bunch of things that maybe I'm not proud of. And I was like, whoa, like I was reading some of them and I was like, this is exciting. You don't feel like the worst person in the world anymore, because you realize, like, listen, we all make mistakes. You've gone back, you've made amends when you have needed to. You, like you said, you've been forgiven. Maybe you need therapy to help work on the fact that you can't forgive yourself. But that might be a separate issue from OCD. I don't know. But if you're compulsively trying to solve for it, then some ERP around that. But I'm a big fan of mindfulness, which tells us we only have control in this moment, right? I don't know if you've ever heard this profound little, I don't know what it is, saying, a rhyme, is yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery. That really resonated with me as somebody with OCD. I often tell people, listen, unless you have a time machine, you're not going back in time, and you're not going forward into the future. So since right here is all you have, let's just keep pulling our mind and our presence and our thoughts back into right here, because this is where we are. So if we're just thinking about the past all the time, we're actually ruining right now. So that's what I have to say about real events and things of that nature. All right. How do you do ERP with harm OCD? Great question. It's also a very broad question with a lot of answers. So it depends on what type of harm OCD you have. But all ERP is tailored to however it's presenting for each person. We are not all the same, so it can, be different. Let's just say it's just going to make it up. I'm afraid I'm going to stab. Let's go with my sister. With a knife. So I'm staying away from sharp objects. I'm not using knives anymore, things of that nature. Your ERP will start with low things that are not bothering you too much, like maybe thinking about being around knives, maybe thinking about what type of harm you're thinking about your sister. Maybe it'll work your way up to getting used to being around knives nearby, but not touching them. Maybe eventually you move up to you can hold a butter knife and you're like, okay, all right, look at me. And we work with you and you're like, okay, I didn't stab anyone with the butter knife. And then maybe you work all the way up to a large butcher knife. Why do you have that, Tracie? It's because I'm an ERP therapist. And then maybe you get used to holding that. And then you're like, hey, look. And then you learn that just as I'm holding a knife doesn't mean that I randomly stab people, because it turns out holding a knife and having OCD doesn't equal murder. So that's one example. But yeah, how do we do ERP with harm OCD? Depends what it is, how it's presenting for you. We work on things that are really easy and work our way up to things that are more difficult, which as we knock out the smaller things, the bigger things feel less big. Okay, I really like this one. Hi, everybody. Is it possible for intrusive thoughts to go away permanently? I feel like I need a drum roll, like do-do-do-do-do-do. No. Nope. Is it possible? I guess anything's probably possible. Like, I don't know, like maybe there's a magical cure that will exist one day, or maybe, I don't know, who knows? But no, not right now. That's not how OCD works. It is not curable, but it is manageable and treatable. Some intrusive thoughts do go away over time. If you've had OCD long enough, you know this. If you've had OCD treatment, then you know this. Sometimes one theme just magically, you're working on it and you're like, wow, that doesn't bother me anymore. But then different intrusive thoughts come. So is it possible for certain intrusive thoughts to go away permanently? Sure. Sure. But is it possible to never have intrusive thoughts while also having OCD? No. And again, I want to be sure to cover intrusive thoughts, intrusive images, intrusive urges, intrusive feelings, intrusive all kinds of things, bodily function. So I know that feels upsetting, but at the same time, ERP can give you some hope and ways to deal with that. So it kind of makes you just care less about it. So yeah, so I kind of like that. Good question. And let's talk about it because it is Suicide Awareness Week. So we should be talking about this anyway. How do you know you just have suicidal OCD and you're not actually suicidal? Have a new theme, I guess, and it's freaking me out so badly. Good question. And suicidal OCD is under the umbrella of harm OCD. How do you know the difference? Couple of things. One is you get a really good assessment with somebody who knows what they're doing, such as an ERP professional at NoCD, which, like I said, you can find us at treatmyocd.com or on any of the socials, and schedule a free call or a free messaging session with somebody on our care team to find out more about how we can help you. But one of the first things we do is assessments, and we do safety assessments, and we also do OCD assessments. Having actual OCD with suicidal content is not the same as actually being suicidal. Why? And how do you know this? Okay, because suicidal people are greatly depressed, very much at their wits' end, very much are feeling like this is hopeless and this is what needs to happen. People with suicidal OCD are distressed by these thoughts. They are confused by these thoughts. They don't know why this is happening, and it starts to cause confusion and make you wonder what is happening and make you wonder if you really are. Sometimes things like you can see words on signs and be like, that might be a sign, or just start thinking too much about it. You can be like, oh no, I shouldn't be around pills because I might take them. I shouldn't be around belts because I might use them in a weird way. I shouldn't be around knives because I might, harm myself, right? And so all of that kind of obsessing about it and then doing compulsions like avoiding things, avoiding stuff, checking how you feel, seeking reassurance from other people, seeking certainty, those are some of the best ways to know that you have suicidal OCD or any other type of OCD. So just know that suicidal OCD is the same as all other kinds of OCD. It's just the content happens to be sucky and about suicide. But yeah, so there's that. And of course, if you ever feel like you're in a real crisis, and you really are, you can always call 988, which is a crisis mental health and suicide prevention hotline in the US, and also 911. You can go to an emergency room. Don't do it as a compulsion. I'm saying do this if you're really a danger to yourself. All right. Let's see what we got here. We have a couple minutes. We might get in a couple more. All right. Went down the OCD obsessed rabbit hole after a friend ghosted me. Oh, yeah. Got triggered very hard, felt rejected, abandoned, and making up stories in my mind. Yep. So I'm reading the compulsion, making up stories in my mind. Sounds like mental compulsions, rumination, which is making it worse, of course. Those are the kinds of things that really leave us in uncertainty, right? Like, okay, you were my friend, and now I don't know what happened to you. I've had that happen before. Sometimes that happens like suddenly somebody unfriends you or stops following you, or I don't know, you call or you text and they don't text you back, and you're like, what is happening? We are our worst enemies. We will make up crazy things in our minds. Let me remind you this, and I hope this helps. You're probably not a professional mind reader because they don't exist. So since you don't know why, this is, again, an example of when we have to sit with the uncertainty. I don't know why my friend ghosted me. And you can use all the things that I was talking about earlier. You can lean into it. You can be like, sucky friends, ghosting me all the time. You can just do whatever you need to do to get through this, but don't make up stories about it because they're all going to be terrible, right? And it's compulsing and it's going to make it worse. We have to accept the fact that we don't know the reason unless this person lets you know. There's only one person that knows why. That's your friend, or maybe not a friend. And so, yeah, try and resist that. All right. I think we might have time for one more. Okay. Let's see. This one. Have you ever heard of rhyming OCD? I have to rhyme sentences in my head in order to move on with my day. I spend countless hours researching online for rhyming words. OCD is so cruel. Yep. Yes, I have. So sometimes it's like weird, just right, magical thinking. There's a lot of different reasons we do weird stuff. I had a really similar, well, maybe not perfectly similar, but used to drive me crazy. I still have to resist this urge, but every sign I would pass, or even whether I'm driving on freeways or streets, or whether I just see signs at the store or whatever, I would have to read the word forward, backward, and then forward again before I could move on. Oh, miserable. There was no reason for it. It just didn't feel right till I had it done. But what would I say that you should do about it? Don't rhyme on purpose. Don't spend countless hours online looking for rhyming words. You are compulsing so hard. Stop it. Stop it. You don't need rhyming words. Instead, maybe try doing the opposite of what OCD is telling you and don't rhyme. So, it's like, I don't know, it's like cake. And then you're like, broom, ha, I'm not rhyming. And then move on anyway, right? Because in real life, you don't need to rhyme to move on with your day. Just OCD is making that weirdo rule for you and you're following it. So, thank you, everybody, for coming and for sticking around for the last hour. I hope this was helpful. If you haven't already reached out to us, please reach out for us. Even just we have community boards that you can just join and get information. Come see our blogs. Come find us at treatmyocd.com. And may you all be well and may you all resist your compulsions. All right. Talk to you soon.